Retail Rendez-Vous, a podcast where technology and retail meet. I'm your host, Melanie Frank, Senior Marketing Advisor at Jesta I.S. Today, we will be talking about Buy Now, Pay Later, an increasingly popular payment method that has been getting a lot of attention these days. I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker, an industry expert in the fintech industry, Stephen New, Director of Partnerships at Citcon. Citcon is a global provider of in-store, online, and mobile payment solutions. So thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie, for having me. I'm very excited to be here and able to speak about Buy Now, Pay Later. It's all the rage nowadays. So as much as we can educate on it, then we'll make it better.
Exactly. So before we jump onto our topic of discussion, can you give us a quick introduction of yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Citcon a little bit over a year, as you mentioned, in the Director of Partnerships role, really focusing on bringing and equipping merchants and their consumers with the ability to pay with alternative payments, whether that be local domestic payments in North America or even cross-border international payments throughout Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Prior to Citcon, I have over about 10 years of experience in the payments industry, spanning from hardware to the software, and now with Citcon on the transaction side. So excited to be here and talk about this, but yeah, why don't we jump right into it?
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, so yeah, let's jump right in. Today's hot topic is Buy Now, Pay Later, the risks and rewards for retailers and consumers. So the concept of Buy Now, Pay Later is really having its moment. It's the fastest growing payment option and is popular with the younger generation, with almost 75% of Buy Now, Pay Later users are Gen Z and millennials. And where Buy Now, Pay Later used to be popular for large purchases, consumers are now using it on all kinds of everyday purchases. Actually, we're seeing that fashion and apparel are one of the fastest growing shopping categories for Buy Now, Pay Later platforms. So, but at the same time, this rise in popularity, I've been reading a lot about these services, is now raising some concern on the impact that it's having on consumer debt. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the risks and rewards of Buy Now, Pay Later. So my first question to you, Stephen, is, what is Buy Now, Pay Later, and who are the key players in the market?
Yeah, essentially Buy Now, Pay Later is a way of having payments in installment, whether you're buying something on e-commerce on a website or whether that's in store. There are multiple companies out there, global perspective, that have equipped the consumers with the ability to pay in installments. And Buy Now, Pay Later, while that term has been the rage recently over the past couple of years, it's not something new. It's not something new to the market. I was at a conference last year, and a lot of the traditional banks that have been around in the fintech industry for 100 years, they said this Buy Now, Pay Later is not something new. It's something that they've offered previously. It's just that it's essentially been rebranded. But some of the companies that consumers may be familiar with nowadays are Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna. I'd probably say those are the three biggest companies right now. But you get a lot of up and coming companies that are building this installment payment process out. I mean, even Apple now has something called a program called Pay Later, which allows you to follow in the same footsteps, and then PayPal has their Pay in 4. So you get a lot of companies accommodating to the consumers and the demands for this, and the popularity of Buy Now, Pay Later.
Yeah, it is definitely growing in popularity for sure. What are some of the benefits for retailers and some of the benefits for consumers as well?
Yeah, from the retailer perspective, I mean, there's some very eye-opening statistics out there from the retailer perspective. There are three really main things that it does for the retailer. It increases the average order size. It increases conversion. As you know, in the e-commerce space, there's a lot of cart abandonment. People get a little hesitant once they start adding more and more items, whether it's a few pairs of pants, or they start adding purse along with a necklace, whatever it may be. So there's always that cart abandonment issue that e-commerce retailers are always battling. And then the third thing that this Buy Now, Pay Later really does is that it helps consumers are coming back more frequently than they would be with the traditional payments like cash or credit card. So from a merchant perspective, those are the three real main areas that benefit them. And then from consumers, it really allows them, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but from the consumer perspective, it opens up that cash flow flexibility essentially.
Right.
Being able to pay in installments, really own it. Even though they make the decision to purchase it there, they don't necessarily have to make the payments right away. It can be split into multiple payments. And then the difference in comparing with some sort of loan or some sort of potential credit card is that it's really interest fee lending. So it's just another way, convenient way for consumers to spend their money or to evaluate different purchases.
Yeah, and they take ownership right away, right? It's not like back in the day when it was when you did the layaway, when they would put some money down and they weren't able to take their product right away. They had to, pay and then get their product. So now it seems to be taking a whole different spin with the buy now, pay later. You actually get to walk away with your merchandise.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the demographics of the consumer using the buy now pay later is really that younger generation, millennials and Gen
Yeah.
Z. Right? I think one of the statistics that was provided to me was like I think 70% of all buy now pay later, or sorry, 70% of Gen Z and millennials have some sort of buy now pay later functionality or wallet that they've leveraged, that they've used before. So that really is a big target of the merchants as well as the buy now pay later providers like Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna out there, and really part of their marketing plan and strategy.
Right. So how are brands today leveraging the buy now, pay later?
Well, it's if you look at a lot of the buy now pay later providers that I mentioned previously, they really
Yeah.
play like a social media or loyalty aspect to it, right? In the previous layaway or the traditional banks that do installment payments, it was strictly just financial related, right? But with a lot of these new companies, they're making a marketing ploy after it. They do a lot of social media advertising with key influencers. They have their own apps which you can accumulate points for, not just for the loyalty for the merchant, but also with the app companies. You can accumulate points by doing, paying on time, by purchasing more, and then the brands, the way they're leveraging it, especially the popular ones, you see it plastered all over the merchants. Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna, they are leveraging it with them to really grow customer retention. Like I mentioned, those three things for the retailers, really improving or growing that average ticket value, whether it's e-commerce or in store, and then that conversion rate of cart to band menuing. So they're really trying to leverage that to do whatever they can to grow top line revenue for their companies.
Yeah, I see. You mentioned influencers, and I do know that there are a lot of influencers on TikTok, and the younger generation for sure. I've seen it. They actually do the pitch for buy now, pay later, and letting everybody, all the younger generation, know that, hey guys, this is really great. It's you can walk away with it and pay later. And it always, for me, I think of it like that's a little dangerous, for the younger generation, especially if they don't know how to handle their finances. So what are the risks to retailers for buy now, pay later, and the risks for consumers?
Yeah, it was another statistic that I saw there is that I was researching was the credit card. So a lot of the younger generation, the millennials and Gen Z, while they leverage a lot of buy now, pay later, they might not carry a credit card with them as well too. So just that combination of increased spending, basically deferring payment to a later date, and the younger generation potentially with less experience in the financial aspect, it really potentially puts them at risk. Additional credit. And then the good thing about buy now pay later though is that there is no hard credit check required. So while it is easy to apply for it, there is that risk. Like you said, it could add up very quickly because of the increased spending and the deferred payments. That's from a consumer perspective. From a retail perspective, unfortunately there has been it has been a target for fraudulent activity for cyber criminals because of the less regulation on this versus your traditional payment methods like credit card. So there is a couple different methods of of risk that there is, or how a cyber criminal will handle that. They can basically collect a user's information and act as them, or they can tap into their login information and basically just, if the consumer already had an existing Klarna or Afterpay account, they tap right into that, whether they have the password, and then they could just do a lot of purchases using that in similar fashion. Because it is less regulated, there's a much higher risk for that in that BNPL space. So while that's a growing concern, there are definitely some steps taken by different companies and merchants to offset that.
Yeah, I mean, cyber criminals, they're getting savvy, that's for sure. And they seem to always be, from what I see, one step ahead all the time. So how can retailers increase their fraud defenses without impacting the customer experience?
Yeah, so I'll just give a very high level insight into,
Sure.
how a chargeback request would happen in the buy now, pay later space. So because in a traditional credit card space, the merchant is or in cash space, the merchant is getting paid by the consumer directly. So in this buy now, pay later, a consumer is borrowing from the provider like Klarna, Afterpay, etc., and then the merchant is being paid by that provider. So a consumer would have to take up a chargeback request with Klarna or with Afterpay, and then they would work with the merchant. So in traditional credit card, if the merchant is accepting that, the consumer is really not at risk. But in this case, it's a little bit of they have to do more digging, bottom line. So what merchants can do to really protect themselves is, there are third-party companies, chargeback companies. It's not specific to just the credit card space, but also buy now, pay later. It encompasses all of that, an umbrella standpoint that will help put processes in place to really identify, okay, is this consumer, based on their habits, based on their demographics, etc., are they going to be buying a $100,000 Mercedes, or are they going to? Is this part of their their trend and spending habit for that specific consumer based on their past spending habits? So leveraging a third-party chargeback or fraud prevention company, and also just being more diligent in that aspect of identifying who the consumer is during that purchase time. So that's one of the main things that how a retailer can really limit that and limit their exposure from that perspective. And then a lot of those things are running behind the scenes, so it doesn't impact consumer experience at least from a user interface, from either from the app or checkout perspective. So that's how they can offset those increased fraudulent activities with buy now, pay later.
Interesting. Good tips. Thank you. Well, this is definitely a key industry trend to watch and track, which I will be in the next couple of years, that's for sure. Statistics are showing that the adoption is set to continue to increase over the next few years. So I've read that the number of buy now, pay later US users in the forecast is to climb to 88.2 million in 2023 and in 94.4 million in 2024. So I will definitely be curious to see how this plays out in the coming years, for sure. So thank you. Yeah. Do you have any additional points that you'd like to share? Please.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we haven't been able to speak to yet was, the Citcon Jesta partnership. So with Jesta growing in that in-store space, as I mentioned, buy now, pay later, it is available in store or e-commerce purchasing methods. So with Jesta and Citcon's relationship, deploying their solutions to different merchants internationally, we've partnered together to support different buy now, pay later wallets in a very simple manner. So the majority of the time, all a consumer would need to do when they have either a Klarna or Afterpay or Firm Wallet is essentially there's a way to pay via your QR code, and then once at the merchant, they're able to scan that QR code with the barcode scanner, and everything just gets processed behind the scenes. So a very, very seamless transaction, whether the merchant's looking to accept a domestic from a domestic consumer, or whether they have international consumers as well too.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for adding that. So thank you, Stephen, for this great conversation. I appreciate you sharing your expertise, and I look forward to having you joining us on future podcasts. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Melanie. Always a pleasure.
So you've been listening to Retail Rendezvous, a podcast where technology and retail meet. If you would like to be a guest on Retail Rendezvous, please reach out to marketing@justis.com and be sure to check out any past episodes you may have missed. Thank you for tuning in.